Somebody will be blessed today. And that somebody will be you. Somebody will be blessed today. And that somebody will be me. Praise be to God. I pray that you are blessed by your time with us here today at Montgomery Presbyterian Church. My friend Don Coomer and I were having a coffee this morning. We were talking about how much joy we experience when we come to Montgomery Presbyterian. And I'd walked down the driveway to pick up the mail, and I waved as people drove on by, and I thought, man, do they know what kind of joy that they are missing when they pass on by? They just need to come through these doors. So I pray that you leave here today feeling lifted, that your spirit feels strengthened, that you go away feeling blessed with joy and blessed with hope. The South African cleric, the South African anti-apartheid cleric, Bishop Desmond Tutu once said this about hope. Bishop Tutu said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite of all the darkness around us." Ever been in that place where your life feels like you're surrounded by darkness and all you need is a little hope to see the light? Today we begin the season of Advent, a month-long journey toward Christmas. And my message for you today is very simple. One word: hope. Can you remember that one word? Hope? Good. Then I'm done my sermon. I'm finished. Y'all are hoping I am done. I don't know. The one word for you today, for me, for this world is hope. Hope when all around you is darkness. Hope, not wishful thinking, but hope. Hope, not pie-in-the-sky optimism. Oh, it'll all turn out. No, hope. Hope that searches. Hope that looks in the dark for light. Hope that is not a noun, but hope that is a verb. Something we Christians do. We hope. That is the act, perhaps the central act of our faith today. It is to hope. To hope is to be awake. The hope is to lift up our heads and look for the redemption in Jesus Christ that is drawing near. The hope that was promised to us in Jesus 2,000 years ago. Hope means to be awake. It means to be on guard. That's what Jesus said, isn't it? Luke chapter 1, verse 34, Jesus said, "Be on guard," in case you missed it. Be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down. Not weighed down with dissipation, not weighed down with drunkenness, and not weighed down with the worries of this life. In Christ, even in the darkness, there is hope. No wonder he tells us to be on guard. Now, none of you here in this room have ever met my oldest brother, Stephen. Some of all y'all online maybe have met my brother Stephen. Stephen, back in the day, back when he was in university, was a fencing champion. He fenced and won all sorts of awards for saber and épée fencing. He went all state in Michigan, and sorry to our Ohio fans today, but he went to Michigan, won. He won all province, Ontario. I went and saw my brother fence every now and then, and it surprised me when I watched him fence. Not only did he come out in this big white suit that looked like, some long johns and wore that weird white mask, but when he got ready to fight, to fence, there was a ref. And the ref, even in this day and age, shouted that French swashbucklers saying, "En garde!" And I thought, what does that really mean, en garde? I looked it up. On guard means to be ready. Are you ready? Are you prepared? I think that's what Jesus' message is to us as we begin this season of Advent. I think that's what Jesus' message is for us as we live in this world, especially in times of darkness, to be on guard, to be awake, to be ready, to be looking for the signs of God's light coming into our lives, breaking in on us all the time, to be awake, to be on guard. Now, I don't know about all y'all, but when it comes to tough times and being awake, I'm like a lot of folks who'd rather sleep through it. I'd rather hit a dark time, and I'd rather say, well, wake me when it's over, right? There are a lot of folks in this world, in this day and age, that want to numb the pain, to flood the darkness of their lives with the artificial light of this world, to drink it away, smoke it away, flash it away with the fast-moving lights and color of entertainment addictions. But that's not the kind of light that Jesus wants us to be on guard for. Jesus doesn't want us to flood our lives with artificial light, whatever your artificial light might be. Jesus wants us to be awake with hope, actively looking for the light of God breaking in on us all the time. I shared a story with some of you maybe a year or two back, a family story that we share in our house. It's a story of a time my father was just 6 or 7 years of age, and he and his sisters were in the car with their dad, my grandpa Emilio. And Grandpa was coming back from a Sunday service somewhere in West Virginia. My grandfather was an American Baptist preacher, and he's driving through this snowstorm on the way home and got these 3 little kids in the car, and he's white-knuckling it through a blinding snowstorm, trying to get home to southern Ohio where they lived, get these kids home safely, when Grandpa hit a patch of ice and his old Ford started sliding and skidding, and it went off the road on this steep mountain in northern West Virginia, and the car began bouncing and tumbling all the way down the hill. It was careening toward the lane of traffic that was coming from the opposite direction. The kids still fast asleep in the car. My grandfather started shouting, "Kids, wake up, we're gonna die." Thankfully, they did not die. The car skidded to a halt in the snow and the mud, almost into oncoming traffic. My dad says that years later, when he was a teenager, he asked his father about that experience. He said, "Dad, we were fast asleep. If we were going to die, why did you wake us up?" And my grandfather said, "Son, I thought if you were going to meet the Lord for the first time, your eyes should be wide open. I wanted you awake." Now, I think that's a great story. I think when we all stand before the judgment seat and we meet Jesus for the first time, I believe when we close our eyes for the last time here on this good earth and we open them for the first time and we look into the eyes of Jesus, whose hand stretched out to us to lead us home to that place where He promised He would go and prepare a place for us, I want my eyes open. I want to meet Jesus that way. But I think Jesus asks us to be awake not just when we die. Jesus wants us to be awake now. Jesus wants us to be on guard, to be awake and ready to meet the signs, the light of God coming to us, especially in the dark times. Jesus wants us awake, not just on the final day, but now. Now, when I began, I said, how many of you have ever been there before in one of those dark places? And I saw a lot of nods. I can't see y'all online, but imagine some of you have been in one of those dark places too. Maybe uncertainty about your futures, maybe some difficulty in your relationships, maybe the dark time of some real serious health problems and health scares. We've all been there. To offer you hope or to challenge you to hope in dark times is not to diminish the darkness. The darkness is very real. But I believe Jesus wants us to actively, faithfully live with hope. Not hope as a noun, but hope as a verb, what we do as we live and find our way through those dark times. Jesus wants us to look for the light of God in those dark times. It's in the dark times that light is shining for us. I've heard the cliche that it's in the darkness the light shines the brightest. Yes and no. If you've ever experienced the dark night of a soul, you may have really struggled to find the light. You may have cried out to God and say, God, where are you? This is a difficult time. I'm in pain, Lord, help. I'm scared, Lord, help. I'm living with fear, Lord, help. I'm experiencing an injustice, Lord, help. And that's okay. Jesus, though, says, just look for your help there in the darkness. Don't try to numb it away. Don't try to flood it with artificial light. Don't try to pretend that you're not in pain. Just lift up your head and look for the light there. There's a Canadian singer-songwriter by the name of Bruce Cockburn. He wrote this wonderful song years ago called Lovers in a Dangerous Time. But I remember in that song, he said, nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. Sometimes you got to kick at the darkness until it bleeds light. That line has stuck with me all those years. Sometimes we have to kick at the darkness until it bleeds light. Don't run from it. Don't flood it with artificial light. Stand up in the face of our darkness with hope. Cry out to the one who promises us the light of God, Jesus Christ. Anyone tells you can live with life without pain, they're telling you a lie. The truth is, we all know life without pain is a myth, but life without hope is not. Hope in the midst of our hardship teaches us to look for the light. It trains us how to spot the light, and it calls us to faithfully move toward the light. Even in times of uncertainty, even in times of insecurity or injustice, Jesus says, lift up your heads for your redemption is drawing near. Oh, he listed, there's going to be signs. This is going to be troubled times. There will be fear and foreboding. But lift up your heads, for your redemption is drawing near. The great 20th century theologian Karl Barth once said that God does not cause suffering. God does not put us in the darkness, so to speak. But he said sometimes God allows us to dwell there in the darkness, so that we can learn to call out God's name. The darkness might have a lesson for us. Maybe the darkness is the place that teaches us to cry out for God and for God's name. Maybe God is at work in our lives, especially in the dark times. God calls us to live with hope in the dark times. It's easy to hope when things are going well, isn't it? It's easy to hope on the sunshiny day. But when the clouds move in and the storm pours down on us and we live in the darkness of this world, that's where faith comes in. That's when Christ says we must hope. Not hope as a noun, hope as a verb, when we must live faithfully looking for the signs of God in our midst. I have a friend who's a pastor as well. And years ago, her name is Pam, and I remember years ago asking Pam about her call to ministry. I said, what was it that led you into ministry? She said it was hope. I said, what do you mean? And she told me this story that I'm going to share with you right now. She said she was working as a social worker in South Africa back in the late 70s and early 80s, during a time when injustice was codified in law, during the time of apartheid in South Africa. And she was a social worker. She was caring for people. She had a good heart, and she was bound and determined to somehow do something that would better this world. And she said, I remember at one point being sent into this shanty town, very poor, all black South African community. And she said, I pulled my humble little car up in front of this shack, which it sort of passed for a home for this family. She said there was no door, no windows, really just a roof and 4 walls and one big room in which everybody lived. And she said, I went into the home to visit with this family, And she said we sat on kind of hard wooden chairs by the one single table they had, and a bunch of kids scrambling around, having kind of fun. Kids, even in tough times, can find a way to play and make up their own games. But Pam said at one point while we were visiting, she said, I noticed this bunch of swaddling cloths laying in the corner. And she said, I heard this little whimper. And she said, who's that? And the woman said, that's my child. My child is very, very sick. And Pam got up to take a look, and sure enough, here was this infant who was really, unhealthy, sickly looking, and wrapped in these cloths, sleeping. And she said, Pam said to the mother, your child needs to go to the hospital. There's not one very far from here. And the woman said, but they won't see us. They won't treat us. I'm black. South African. Apartheid. And Pam said, well, let me take you. Maybe today they'll see you. And Pam said she picked up this child in swaddling cloths and sickly looking child in her arms, and they went out to her humble little car, the mother and child and Pam, and they drove to the nearest hospital. She came in through the doors of that hospital, and the nurse said, oh, no, we can't treat you here. That child is black. Pam said, let me talk to the doctor. I'm not taking no for an answer today. This child won't live unless you treat it. And the doctor came out and said, no, I will not treat that child. This child is black. You know what Pam said? She said, you bloody well will today. And I don't know if it was the fierceness of the Holy Spirit or the empowerment of Pam's hope, but that doctor took that child, treated that child, made that child well. When I asked Pam about hope, she said, well, Mark, it was hope that made me pick up that child, hope that we could get that hospital to receive the child. It was hope that gave me enough courage to get out of the car and step through the doors of that hospital that I knew wanted its doors metaphorically closed to that child. It was hope that allowed me to stand up to that nurse and demand to see the doctor, and it was hope that gave me those words to say, you'll bloody well treat this child today. And I said, well, where'd that hope come from? And Pam said, when I picked up that child for the first time in that little shack, she said, I felt like I was picking up the Christ child, wrapped in swaddling cloths. She said, I felt like I was picking up the Christ child who was born an infant, who became a refugee in the first 2 years of his life, and by the time he was 33, he was executed for a crime he did not commit. She said, when I picked up that child, I felt like I was touching injustice, and it awakened within me a kind of Christian hope. I knew that this was not the world that God wanted. This was just the very dark world in which we live. And she said, if I had enough hope, then maybe we could make this world a different place. She said, that's why I became a Christian pastor. Friends, God's light is breaking in on us all the time, especially during the dark times. Some people might want to sleep through the dark times. Some people might want to numb the pain or flood the darkness with artificial light, but some will dwell in the darkness with Christian hope. Some will take the Christ child into their arms, into their hearts, and some will stand up in the face of injustice and find God's light shining on them even then. Lift up your heads, said Jesus, your redemption is drawing near. Friends, real hope is seeing the light despite of all the darkness around us, said Bishop Desmond Tutu. Hope is a verb. If you can take anything away from this time today, put it in your pocket, take it out as you need it in the days ahead, in your life journey ahead. Take that out. Remember, hope is a verb. It's active, it's faithful, and it searches trusting that no matter how dark the night, the light of God is always near to us. Praise be to God. Amen.